What's up guys, Hunter Knesny here. Today we're talking everything you need to know about the Texas rig. So the Texas rig is really one of the most versatile baits there is. I mean, you can really realistically fish this from 0 feet. I mean, you could go as deep as 50, 60, 70 feet. Really, the depth is unlimited with this. So this is really truly a bait where you can cover all depths of the range and really do it as effectively as just about any other technique out there. So Texas rig is definitely something you should be using, and I'm really going to dive deep into it and give you guys everything you need to know and give you guys some things maybe you haven't considered before. So without further ado, if you're new to my channel, I've been bass fishing for over 20 years now. I make educational videos like this, and I also make videos where I do challenges, tournaments, just fun days on the water, things like that. So if you're new to the page, hit that subscribe button. I'm sure they'll give you some useful information that you'll like later down the road. Getting into the Texas rig, I'm gonna go ahead and start out shallow, and we're gonna kind of work our way down throughout the depths and just cover really anything in between there. So starting off shallow, like you saw a second ago here, this is kind of just a standard flipping type Texas rig. So the way I'm generally gonna set this up, you have your EWG hook. I like using super line hooks when I'm flipping. That's kind of personal preference, depends what size baits you're using, different things like that, but generally going to steer towards the super line hooks. And then you're going to put a bead, a weight, and then I like using a bobber stop to kind of hold everything together. So when you're flipping, basically what I'm looking for is heavy cover. So that can be like wooded trees, that can be grass, tules, it could even be things like docks, big rocks, things like that. It's just really any type of cover that bass can relate to, and that's different than just going down the bank and anything else there. So generally I'm going to steer more towards the vegetation side of things, so tules, grass, trees. So the way you're going to do this, like I said, that's kind of how you're going to set your bait up. So you're going to tie a hook on, there's going to be a bead, weight, bobber stop. And generally when I'm doing this is going to be really geared towards the more heavy cover. So when I'm picking a bait for that situation, I want it to be more compact more times than not. And the reason behind that is that allows that to kind of slip through that heavier vegetation. So if you're throwing it through some thick grass or tules, it just allows it where there isn't as many appendages to kind of grab on things and keep it from getting down to the bottom. So the baits I'm generally going to start with, and I'll branch off of these sometimes, but more times than not, it's either going to be the Missile D-Bomb or the Reaction Innovation Sweet Beaver. So those are my two personal favorites. The Missile D-Bomb's just a little bit more kind of lively, has a little bit more action, but I mean, I've been flipping the Reaction Innovation Sweet Beaver for pretty much my whole life, and I mean, I'm never gonna probably sway too far off of that because it just flat works. You're gonna want to rig this weedless. You bury the hook tip just slightly. You're gonna want to throw that right into the middle of the cover. Really, you're looking for to get it as deep in the cover as you can, especially this time of year in the summer. You really want to focus on those shade pockets. So if you have a full-size trees, for example, and the sun's kind of shining in and there's a shady side of it, you really need to focus on that shady side rather than kind of picking the whole tree apart, because generally that's going to be where the fish are sitting, especially as it gets warmer in the day. When picking the bait, generally I'm going to go with either the full-size, one of those two options, so the full-size D-Bomb or the full-size Sweet Beaver, or I'm going to go with the downsized one. So that would be like the Smallie Beaver. I think it's the Baby D-Bomb is what the smaller one's called for the D-Bomb. And the way that I'm going to pick that is depending on fish size and kind of, I mean, there's some factors that go into it, but generally I'm going to start with the bigger one, and then if I need to, I can always downsize that. So fishing most of the normal lakes that I fish, like Roosevelt, Saguaro, Canyon, like places like that, I'm almost always going to use the bigger one, and I don't really go to the smaller one very often. But if I'm fishing a lake like Lake Pleasant or Bartlett, or just maybe Clearwater lakes in general, like you could argue like a Lake Mojave, for example, Lake Havasu, where they have a lot of smallmouth as well, then that's when that smaller size kind of starts to come in play there. So if it's just pretty dirty water, kind of run-of-the-mill lake, nothing too crazy going on, has pretty decent sized fish in it, then I'm probably going to use the full size one. If you start to run into extra challenges, like the water is like just ridiculously clear, fish are smaller in general, maybe there's a lot of small crawdads in there, maybe you're fishing ponds where it's getting a lot of pressure and it's just getting the bites is the hard part, then you might want to steer more towards the smaller one. So when I'm setting this up, the next thing you want to consider is so first and foremost, you want to pick what bait you're gonna, or what size bait you're gonna use. Then you need to consider what weight you might need to kind of pair with that. So when I'm flipping wooded trees, I'd say probably 80-90% of the time I'm just going to use a standard 1/2 ounce tungsten flipping weight, and really that covers most of the bases where it's heavy enough it's going to pull that bait through no problem, but it's not super heavy either, where it has kind of a fair speed when it's falling, but it's not like just a bullet straight to the bottom. It's kind of got a little action, lets the bait do its thing. It just works very well. If I'm fishing more like tules or grass or anything like that, where you start to get some kind of matted vegetation on the surface, then I'm probably going to start with the 3/4. And the 3/4 most of the time is going to be heavy enough where it's going to be able to pull that bait through the cover and make sure that it's getting down effectively. If you're just throwing and you're always getting stuck and you're not really getting that bait to go through the cover, then you probably need to upsize it to make sure that you're actually fishing it effectively. If it's not getting down to where the fish are, you're never really going to catch much, because you got to get where the fish are to be able to catch them. So that's generally where I start. And that's kind of more geared towards the full size one. So if you're throwing the smaller one, then you could probably downsize that about 1/8 of an ounce and kind of follow the same principles, do the same thing more or less, just about 1/8 ounce lighter. So if I was flipping this one and I'm fishing more kind of wooded stuff, then I might start with like a 3/8 rather than a 1/2 ounce, just because there isn't as much mass on this. It's not as much resistance in the water, and this will go through it a lot quicker, where you don't need that extra weight to pull it through there. Pretty simple. When you're actually fishing it, you're gonna throw it right into the middle of the cover. I let it sink to the bottom. I just kind of lift it up maybe 3 times, let it sit for a minute, lift it another time or 2, and then you reel it in, cast it to the next spot. So when the fish bites it, you're either gonna flip in there, you go to pick it up and you just feel weight, which means that he bit it on the way down, and you probably didn't feel it, but he just grabbed it as it was falling down there. And if you feel the weight, you kind of gotta feel a little, and if it loads the rod up, set the hook. You probably have a fish on there. If you don't, then I mean, hook sets are free, so no point in missing a fish just because you were unsure of it. The other thing that's going to happen, you throw it down there, you lift it, and then just thump, you're going to feel them smack it. So obviously that's going to feel like just about any other standard bite where you're kind of dragging a bait, where they just thump it, set the hook, reel them in, try and get them out of that cover as quick as you can, and don't let them get tangled. And as far as equipment, so when I'm flipping and kind of fishing around vegetation, trees, things like that, I'm generally going to want to use a heavy rod. So I mean, kind of depends on how thick the cover is, on how crazy you need to get with the equipment. But I mean, your standard heavy kind of rod is generally going to work pretty good for this, which most people have, and you shouldn't really need to get anything too crazy to be able to do this. So heavy rod, you're going to want a fast reel, so a 7 or an 8-to-1 reel. As far as line, you're going to want, generally I'm going to start with like 15 to 20, and that's going to cover my bases, I'd say 90% of the time. If you're feeling or fishing really heavy vegetation, like you're even punching, where you're having to use like, I mean, ounce plus size weights, and you're really fishing that thick grass and just trying to get through as much stuff as you can, then sometimes it's better to bump up to braid and use braid for that. And on top of just additional strength, it also kind of saws through that stuff a little bit easier, where the fluorocarbon will kind of grab it and sometimes it doesn't come through as good. That braid can saw the grass and just it helps get through it a little bit easier. But yeah, that pretty much sums it up. If you're doing the smaller one with line size, you could go down a little bit. Like I said, that small one's gonna shine more in kind of harsher, harder to fish conditions, where I mean there's just a lot of fishing pressure, or there's something like super clear water, just something going on that's making it harder, where you're not gonna get as many bites with the big one. So going with smaller line size can really help in that situation. So rather than using like I mean 15 to 20 when I'm generally fishing in some pretty heavy cover. You might go down to like 10 to 15 or something like that, where it's still got some strength on it. Yeah, you might not have the horsepower you have with that bigger line, but you might get bites by doing that you might not with the bigger line. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. I think that pretty much sums up shallow fishing or flipping for the most part. So shallow, I'm gonna call shallow is gonna be like more like fishing that like 0 to like 6 foot range. And we're gonna go all the way down to deep pretty quick here, but I think that pretty much sums that up. If you have any questions on it, feel free to drop that down below. I'd be happy to get those answered. Next thing I want to kind of get into is we're gonna start small and then we're gonna work our way to the bigger baits. So the Texas rig really, I feel like it's kind of a little bit underutilized in some sense, because like for example what I'm about to get into, like this same category, you have people doing a lot of drop shots, Ned rigs, shaky heads, things like that, but I don't really hear of too many people trying these Texas rig baits, and it's another way to really use those finesse presentations to show them something that they probably haven't seen before, because I don't figure there's probably too many people at your local lake that might be doing these things. So for those guys, like I said, fishing real clear water, I mean, if you're just having a real tough day on the water, if you're fishing a pond that's got a bunch of pressure, things like that, try these things first, because I think that you're probably going to get more bites doing things like that than the other end of the spectrum, where we're going to get to a little bit later. But one thing I wanted to throw out there is trying a Finesse Texas rig. So this is a this is the Rain's mini ring cross. So this thing's really small. The full-size D-bomb, for example, I mean, you can really see the difference here. This is, I mean, it's really only the size of the body of it. It doesn't have even the size of the claws. So throwing that, I mean, you can really fish this from pretty shallow to almost any depth. You'll just have to kind of adjust your weights accordingly. But throwing that just on like a little 1/8 ounce Texas rig, this size bait, you're probably gonna want like a size 2 EWG hook. And then you're going to want to use pretty light lines, so I would probably throw this anywhere from like 4 pound on the extreme end all the way to like 8. But try that and fish it kind of similar ways you'd throw a drop shot. So go fish it out on the points, humps, rocky banks, things like that. I mean, you can also, if you guys are fishing shallower water where you're maybe fishing a pond or something, you could flip these by bushes, kind of similar to what I was talking about earlier, just a much more compact presentation. And I think you're going to get some bites that maybe you weren't expecting. And I mean, this will catch big fish too. It's not just going to be a numbers thing. I mean, big fish swims by a little crawdad sitting down there, he's going to just scoop that up just like you would a bigger one. So definitely something to try. At our local lakes right now, this time of year in the summer, I would probably be doing this anywhere from like, I'd say 15 is probably going to be more of the shallower side of things, but like 15 to 40, it can really shine in those depth ranges. And the hotter it gets, I feel like the fish move deeper, and I mean, I wouldn't be scared to try that thing pretty deep. So that's one thing to try. And then you could go up as heavy as like a 1/4 ounce weight if you need to, if you're really fishing that deeper end. But I would say just kind of match it to about what you would use for your normal drop shot setup. So, and then as far as equipment, you can either do that on just normal drop shot spinning rod, like medium light, fast action rod, nothing too crazy. Or you can also do it on like a BFS setup like I have here, where this is the Dobbins Sierra Ultra Finesse. It's the 701, so 7 foot, ultra light. And then I just have a Crota BFS reel here. So, I mean, if I was gonna do this, I'd probably put 6-pound line on it and just let it rip. Nothing too crazy. You're just gonna throw that out and then just slowly drag it along the bottom. Pretty easy to fish. That just kind of gives a little bit of a, maybe a category you haven't thought about before, but that kind of BFS / Ultra Finesse Texas rig is another finesse way to fish that there just really isn't too many people trying. So throwing any kind of craw bait, I mean, here's another one here, just the micro D-bomb, pretty similar to that Rain's craw as far as size, just little tiny bait, but man, these things can work. And then as another one that's just a little bit bigger, and I've caught quite a few fish on these things, so they work. is that Demiki Air Cross. So this is the 3-inch one. This is a little bit bigger than the other two options, but still a pretty finessey bait nonetheless, and I mean, it works, so give that a try. Moving down the list, we're gonna jump more kind of into, I'd say, more of the standard size baits now. Throw in a Texas rig, I mean, it's very easy to do. You just throw it out there, let it sink to the bottom, and you just slowly drag it. I like using something that's got a little bit more kind of liveliness to it if I'm gonna just drag the Texas rig on the bottom, where when I'm flipping, I like it to be more kind of, not a ton of appendages or anything too crazy, like more compact, just gets through the cover good. Most of the time they're gonna just lash out of it out of reaction. Where something dragging on the bottom, they might be able to watch that thing for a while, they can see all the action. It needs just a little bit more, I feel, at times to kind of get them to react to it and actually eat it. Where if it's just dragging on the bottom, not doing too much, then sometimes that works really good in the winter, but when they're aggressive, they like seeing some movement as well. So throwing a bait kind of like this Yamacraw here, this is the 3-inch version, where it's got those claws that just kick behind it. That's a really good option. So like I said before, in Arizona this time of year, I'm probably going to be doing this in like 15 to 40 feet, like I said. And our lakes are deeper. I feel like we're generally fishing anywhere from 10 to 20 feet deeper than some of the other people, like in back east, for example. So you got to kind of set the gauge to more or less what is deep in your lake. But in our lakes, that's about the depth I'd be fishing that right now. You're just gonna slowly drag that on the bottom, and it works good. So to give you a few more options that are kind of similar, I mean, I really like the action on this Yamacraw, so that's probably what I'm gonna start with. Give you some other options. You have like the Rage Craw, for example. Kind of similar style bait, just a little bit different, but you can see here, this is the baby one. But it's just got those little appendages that kick behind it. Just gives it something to, or gives the fish something to see. So that's another good one. And then, I mean, I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't mention a brush hog. So this is the baby brush hog here. I mean, I've caught more fish on these things than most baits dragging on the bottom. So, I mean, between that Yamacraw and that brush hog, if you just had those two things and you tried either one of those, I feel like on any given day, if there's any fish that are going to bite at all, they should bite those two things. Setup for this. So when I'm doing something like this where I'm more or less dragging it, not doing anything like super extravagant, you just throw it out, let it sink to the bottom, just slowly dragging it. I'm probably going to throw that on like a medium heavy rod. Probably going to start around like a 3/8 ounce weight. Quarter to 3/8, just depends about how deep I'm fishing. But if you want to get a little bit slower, let the bait kind of fall a little bit more methodically. Every time you pick it up, it's going to fall a little slower than you might do like a quarter. If you're fishing pretty deep and just kind of trying to be a little bit more aggressive with it, or if it's windy, you're just having some trouble feeling the bottom, then the 3/8 a lot of times is going to be kind of what you need. So somewhere between the quarter and 3/8 is generally what I'm going to do with these kind of style of baits. And then when I'm doing this, I actually don't like pegging it. I like having the weight having a little separation and kind of being able to fall more freely, because it doesn't have the bait just stuck to the weight the whole time. So every time you move, it's only ever going to like just be the nose digging down, where when the weight can separate a little, if you go over a little rock, then this bait's going to swim up and then it's going to kind of slowly fall down, just like a normal crawdad would if he was swimming. They don't just shoot straight to the bottom all the time. If they're swimming, they do, but they don't. Like a lot of times they're just going to slowly fall down. So when you go over that rock and then this thing has the weight slide down and then your bait just kind of slowly falls, a lot of times that can be when the fish bites it. So just something to consider. But yeah, I usually don't peg the weights if I'm just dragging them. As far as line size, with this kind of not super big bait, but just kind of middle of the ground, I'm generally going to probably throw this on like 10 to 14. I don't feel like you need super heavy line to get away with this. If you're fishing super clear water, you might even drop it down to like 8, but somewhere between 10 and 14 is going to usually fit most circumstances. You're going to have to kind of consider how much cover's down there, so if there's a lot of brush and different things that you're trying to get it through, then you're probably going to have to go up on the upper end of that spectrum, or towards the 12 or the 14. If it's super rocky and you're tearing your line up super quick, then you're probably going to have to go bump up too, just so that you don't tear it up, and then when you go to set the hook, end up breaking your line, which can happen when you're dragging it through a bunch of rocks, because it will tear it up pretty quick. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is you do have to really kind of watch your line, feel it, make sure there's no nicks, and if there is, retie it before too long, or you're probably going to break it when you set the hook. And then as far as rod and reel, I'm generally going to throw this on like a medium heavy with like a 7 or an 8-to-1 reel. If you have a smaller one, like a Corrado 70 for example, I feel like that works pretty good for this kind of niche of bait. You can throw it on the normal size ones, they'll handle it just fine too, but I do kind of like that little bit downsized reel to kind of match not a super large heavy bait. It does work pretty good. So that pretty much sums up that. The next thing I'm going to mention, and I mean this is kind of a whole category in its own sense, but I mean, once again, can't really talk about the Texas rig without talking about just a big worm. So this is a 10-inch power worm here, but when I'm saying big worms, I'm gonna say probably like that 7-inch and bigger is really what you're leaning towards. So 7 to 10 inch is gonna be kind of that run-of-the-mill, what you're gonna want to focus on most of the time, and then you can always upsize that, especially if you're fishing at night. I know they make some bigger sizes than the 10-inch even. Or if you're kind of feeling a little tougher and not getting as many bites as you want, then maybe you go more towards that 7-inch. But just throwing a big worm, curly tail worm, straight tail worm, just anything from that like 7-inch size and bigger is really something that works very well, especially in the summer. So I mean, it'll work all day long, it'll work all night long. In the night, you might want to bump it up just a little bit in size, but either way, there's plenty to go out there, and this technique just works, and it works well. When you're throwing the big worms, I like starting, I mean, it really depends on what or how big the worm is and how deep you're fishing. So I could throw this on anything from like a 3/8 to a 3/4, just depending on how big it is and how deep I'm fishing. So I'm fishing something a little bit more slender with not a lot of as much resistance on it than something like this ridge worm. You could get away with throwing it on a little bit smaller size. So maybe I'll start with the 3/8. If I'm not fishing or feeling the bottom as much as I would, then maybe I'll jump up to the 1/2 ounce. And I mean, a 1/2 ounce is probably going to cover that for the most part. You don't really probably need to go above that. So if you got something like this power worm, big curly tail worms in general just have kind of a lot more resistance behind them, where it's going to come through the water slower. It just doesn't sink as fast. Like, there's just kind of more going on down there. Then you might have to probably bump up like a 1/4 ounce to offset that. So if you have more of kind of straight tail worm where it sinks pretty quick, there's not a lot of resistance, and you can kind of go on the lower end. If it's got a lot of resistance, then you're probably gonna have to go up. So I'm probably gonna start with a 1/2 ounce weight with that. With the 10-inch specific, or particularly, if you're fishing the 7-inch, then maybe you could go down a little bit in size, but somewhere between that 1/2 ounce, 3/4 is probably what I'm gonna want to throw that on. Like the other techniques, you're just gonna throw that out, let it sink to the bottom, and then you're just slowly dragging it. So you're just kind of counting rocks. You really want to be throwing this in rocks if possible, and when you have the fish bite it, most of the time you're just gonna feel that thump. So when you feel the thump, you set the hook, you reel the fish in, and get them in the boat. As far as equipment, this technique I'm probably gonna throw on like a heavy action rod. Longer can be better, so I'd say at minimum a 7-foot rod, but if you're more in that like 7-6 foot range, that's probably a good range to be with this. So a fast action 7 to 7'6" rod is going to work about perfect for this. Once again, you're going to want to use a fast reel for this, so like a 7 or an 8-to-1 is going to be perfect. You just want to have some speed where you can get caught up to those fish, because sometimes they bite it when you're kind of at the end of your pole, and you got to get caught up to them so that you can reel down and get the slack out of your line before you set the hook. Big worm is definitely something you should be throwing as well. So I mean, we kind of have a gamut going here, from something as small as this little Rains craw to, I mean, something as big as this power worm. And really all of these techniques can work very effectively, and I mean, at any one lake you can catch fish doing any of this. So you can kind of gear it a little bit more towards the specifics of your individual lake. If you're fishing more ponds, like I said, I'm probably going to be more towards this kind of middle ground and left. If you're fishing more of the deeper, clear or big bodied lakes where you're fishing 20, 30, 40 feet deep at times, then these are gonna work. But I'm probably gonna steer more towards that side more times than not. And I mean, right down the middle is a good place to be for a lot of this stuff. So I mean, don't be scared to try the stuff in the middle either, because it works as good, if not better, than a lot of stuff most of the times. The last thing I wanted to mention is color. With these style baits, you don't really need to get super extravagant with it. I mean, if you're throwing like a watermelon or a green pumpkin, that's gonna work in pretty much any lake you're ever gonna fish. There isn't really anything wrong with using those kind of just run-of-the-mill standard colors, because they just flat work. So that's gonna be my first recommendation, is throwing like a watermelon or a green pumpkin. If your lake's a little bit clearer, then I might lean more towards watermelon. If it's kind of dirtier or just 4 feet of visibility and less, then I might lean more towards the green pumpkin. But either one's gonna work in most situations. And then you have other colors, more kind of like this plum type color here, where you got a little brown, got a little purple. This is just a good staple summer color that works, I mean, at pretty much any lake in existence. Another good one. And then if you're fishing more towards like the evening, nights, things like that, early morning, then mixing in some darker colors like a black and blue, just a straight black, things like that is definitely something that can get a few more bites too, where you're fishing in low light conditions, and just having more presence and more silhouette for them to see can help them kind of key into it a little bit better than they might with the lighter colors. I mean, the Texas rig, there's really you could go endlessly with the different options here. So I'll kind of leave it at that for now. One thing I do want to throw out there is, like, don't be closed-minded with this. If you have a certain bait you like using and it works, I mean, try these, because I think you'll have some success on them too. But I mean, that really the opportunities are endless with this. You could throw a lot of different baits that I haven't mentioned here and do very well doing this as well. So try some different baits. Here's some examples you can try, but try some different things. Let me know, like, what's your favorite style bait? Do you like throwing the craws? I mean, you're throwing big worms, you flip in, like what style baits are you guys using? What's your favorite? I'd say my personal favorite is going to be more kind of the compact style bait, because I like doing a lot of flipping. But I mean, any of these things will work, like I said. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm gonna continue doing plenty, so if you have any educational type video ideas that you want to see, drop those down below and I'll make sure to get to that eventually here. Gonna start mixing in some summer challenges where we're trying to break 15 pounds in 5 hours at several of our lakes. Just fun days on the water, things like that. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. Hope you enjoyed that video, and stay tuned for the next one.